Theological videos never spark any sort of heated debate online, do they? Do they? Especially not if I begin by, just insulting an entire side of this argument. Well, I guess there's one way to find out. So, here we go. There is nothing more pitifully hypocritical than the pride of an atheist. So much so that I don't even think it's really that controversial to claim that atheists are prideful. All across the spectrum, from people like me who couldn't care less whether you believe in God or not, to hell, other atheists. We all hate atheists for this very reason. And I think there is no better example of this pride than in a topic that is generally left out of theological discussions. At least left out by your average atheist online, and that notion is the fourth, it could be the fifth or sixth, there's not really numbers to these things. A lesser known attribute of God that is assumed by all Abrahamic religions, that principle being that God is beyond human understanding. It isn't hard to see why atheists tend to leave this one out. Like, I'm not even sure if I need to continue the rest of this video. Obviously, I have things that I want to say that I think are important, so I'm going to. But do I really need to spell out why someone who tries to win a game where one of the rules is you can't know the rules? Where one of the rules is you can't know the rules. Like, not you just don't know them yet and you can learn them. No, just simply you cannot know the rules, nor will you ever know the rules by which you will actually win the game. Do I really need to explain why someone who hears that and goes, nah, I'm gonna win? Do I need to explain why that person may have an inflated sense of self-worth and, I don't know, massive ego? Especially since even the most humble atheist would see a theist, a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, as someone who is mistaken by some degree. Someone who is not as far along in their journey of enlightenment, and so in this analogy, essentially a child. And just because we don't need it for this analogy, let's assume that this fourth attribute that we're about to discuss doesn't even exist. Still, you have it that most theists, like Christians, Jews, Muslims, etc., they admit that they believe through faith. There are those who could claim a religious experience, but for the most part, when you are arguing a spaced theist, you are arguing someone that may have a rationalist argument for why they believe their perception of God is likely to be true, but by their own admission of it being through faith, it is not something that they can absolutely prove. So, coming back to this analogy, here we have you, an adult, going up to a child who made up the rules to a made-up game. You try to beat this child at this game like it's the most important thing in the world. And then when the child says that you lost with the rules he made up, you get upset and act as though you're some unrecognized genius because you actually know the rules to the game. God, I don't think I've laughed like this in a long time. Yeah, but no. We cannot set aside this attribute of God. Just as the power, knowledge, and benevolence of God are all well established by Judeo-Christian literature and oral tradition, so too is the idea that he is beyond our understanding. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Isaiah 55, 8-9. Which is at least 500 years before Epicurus first postulated what is, to my knowledge, the earliest example of the problem of evil, which he explains as, is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then from whence comes evil? The problem with what Epicurus is saying here, or at least this quote that is attributed to him, is that this assumes that a God that does not prevent evil is in fact malevolent. When, unless we're looking at this through like the most childish and tyrannical view of consequentialism ever, this obviously is not necessarily the case. Assuming that free will is good, then it is good for God to allow free will by the same reason, which necessitates the consequences of free will. Now, this brings us to another challenge, where here someone could ask, well, why can't God give us free will without giving us freedom from these consequences? Why does that have to be how free will works? This question is essentially in the same vein as, can God create a stone so heavy that he himself cannot lift it? The answer to which I imagine is yes. But then he isn't all-powerful. No, but that doesn't make any sense. Exactly. It doesn't make sense. Not to me, not to you, because our understanding is formed from the world around us. You are asking me if we can understand something that is quite literally outside of our understanding. If you are some all-powerful being, then of course, by the rules of our universe as we understand it, you should be able to transcend our universe. If not, then you are not all-powerful. You may look at that and go, well, that's our point. No being can be all-powerful in our universe to ever transcend it. But that's just not the claim made by any Abrahamic faith. God came before the universe and is therefore not bound by the rules of it. And it's just so frustrating when people think that this is a valid critique to ask why God would make us bound by the rules, necessitating our toil against evil. Because this is one of those instances where an internal critique is not at all meaningful, because it undermines the very claim it was meant to support. You say there is no God, do you not? And even if you do, what do you think morality is such to have the concept of evil? Are you a moral subjectivist? Because first of all, how dare you waste anyone's time being like, oh, God doesn't exist because he doesn't do what I want him to. Also, assuming that this is the case, how can you reconcile evil being a matter of opinion but also warrant God's intervention in it? If you don't understand what I mean, watch this. Personally, I think it would be evil if God intervened. Boom, there you go. Now he can't, right? Because if morality is subjective, then my morality is in conflict with yours. You're now asking God to prove that he's not evil to you by being evil to me. Also, you're welcome, world. I'm responsible for cancer. But now, obviously, most who believe in God believe in objective morality. So just as your critique held little weight for me, mine now holds little weight for you. However, let's consider what an atheist who believes in objective morality would believe. Imaginably, in order for that person to be both an atheist and a moral objectivist, this person would have to believe that morality is a biocultural adaptation. It would fall under a very contractionalist view of ethics. That is to say that killing, theft, etc. is immoral because it's an undesirable trait that would not be favored by natural selection. A society in which the strong kill the weak would favor the strong, yes, but it would quickly be overpowered and outnumbered by a society in which there is law and order which contribute to prosperity and collaboration, especially considering the law of inverse relationship between size and reproductive output. In short, you can believe morality is objective as an atheist, but unfortunately this establishes an issue from which there is no escape. This would have morality be goal-orientated, which in and of itself is not a problem. Morality, by definition, is goal-orientated. The issue is that you cannot inherently claim that a god would be more good as to not be evil by saying that that god must eliminate the very concept of evil itself. In goal-orientated morality, that which is good is simply the quickest path from A to B in a moral sense. By doing away with the concept that there are any shorter paths because all paths are now equal, having all obstacles eliminated, there would be no concept of right. There would be no most efficient means by which a goal should be accomplished, ultimately making it so there is no goal. Essentially, here we are saying God must prove he is good by destroying all that is good, which is perhaps a greater contradiction than the one allegedly offered up by the problem of evil. And the only resolutions are to find another source for morality, which again would simply be your belief versus that of an all-knowing being, so, not the best argument. Because as far as I know, the only other origin of morality that we haven't covered here with these two arguments is God himself. And I imagine an atheist probably wouldn't pick that. So, the source of morality being settled, we are left to concede that the problem of evil is no problem after all. Benevolence and omnipotence are perfectly compatible. But do atheists accept that? No. If it isn't enough to say that they try to win a rigged game, which, for the record, I am saying this is a rigged game. For any Christians or anyone else out there, you can't make arguments in which you claim that all of God's ways are completely unknowable, and then be a Christian or any other faith where you claim to know some of his ways. Obviously, you can make conjecture about what his ways could be, but ultimately concede that they are unknowable, as I've done in this entire video. But if you care about being honest, you need to approach a conversation with fair and reasonable standards of what can be known. This video isn't an excuse for you to make poor arguments. Too many people will act as though, oh, of course what I'm saying and what I believe, that's something that can be known, but what you're saying, oh, it proves me wrong and it cannot be known. Which I guess just beyond saying that, for anyone who cares, that kind of brings me back to my point. Here I could waste time on the people who are not going to listen to me, but I won't, because do you know how to win a rigged game? Don't play the game! And maybe there's some irony in this that I made this entire video, but obviously I'm just presenting this to people who this argument is used against. And so there's really no point in wasting any further time trying to convince any atheists beyond what I've already explained. Especially since by the nature of what it means to be an atheist, atheists ironically cannot disprove the existence of God. If an atheist believed that there was more than the material world, Rationally, that should imply the existence of one God or another. For if the spirit exists, then whatever form a supreme spirit may take, by definition, that being is a god or the god. If there could be no supreme spirit, by whatever reason, then sure, perhaps in this world there is no God. But again, that's not the claim of any Abrahamic faith. We are not saying God is a material being. He is immaterial. So beyond this physical existence, every soul would have to be one and the same in order for there to be no supremacy. We would all coalesce beyond the limitations of time and space, acting as a world soul or a conscious universe. In either regard, here we find God, a thing an atheist cannot believe in. So the atheist must believe there is no such mystical things beyond our world, becoming a materialist as many atheists in fact do. However, it is then that all things must be proven through observation or measurement of material things. Or else those things cannot be said to exist, as all that exists is the material world. Unfortunately, while many materialists would like to believe that this is the case, it can't be that simple. How do you quantify string theory, dark matter, dark energy, any of these non-physicalist concepts in a material sense? You can't. In denying God, the atheist now denies science itself. The only possible resolutions to this being either accept that there is a God or the God, or accept that such metaphysical questions, like the existence and nature of God, escaping the purview of empirical observation, are, in fact, unknowable.